Sri Aurobindo's been explaining to us about the little life, the entities, the beings that rule that realm, and how they influence our lives and make sure that it remains a little life. So I'm going to read on from the break. Yet was this only a provisional scheme, a false appearance, sketched by limiting sense, mind's insufficient self-discovery, an early attempt, a first experiment. This was a toy to amuse the infant earth. But knowledge ends not in these surface powers that live upon a ledge in the ignorance and dare not look into the dangerous depths or to stare upward, measuring the unknown. There is a deeper seeing from within. And when we have left these small purlieus of mind, a greater vision meets us on the heights in the luminous wideness of the Spirit's gaze. At last there wakes in us a witness soul that looks at truths unseen and scans the unknown. Then all assumes a new and marvelous face. The world quivers with a God light at its core. In time's deep heart, high purposes move and live. Life's borders crumble and join infinity. This broad, confused, yet rigid scheme becomes a magnificent imbroglio of the gods. Again, a work ambiguously divine. Our seekings are short-lived experiments made by a wordless and inscrutable power, testing its issues from inconscient night to meet its luminous self of truth and bliss. It peers at the real through the apparent form. It labors in our mortal mind and sense. Amid the figures of the ignorance, in the symbol pictures drawn by word and thought, it seeks the truth to which all figures point. It looks for the source of light with vision's lamp. It works to find the doer of all works, the unfelt self within, who is the guide, the unknown self above, who is the goal. All is not here a blinded nature's task. A word, a wisdom watches us from on high, a witness sanctioning her will and works, an eye unseen in the unseeing vast. There is an influence from a light above. There are thoughts remote and sealed eternities. A mystic motive drives the stars and suns. In this passage from a deaf, unknowing force to struggling consciousness and transient breath, a mighty supernature waits on time. You'd like to read, Kanyapan?
Yet was this only a provisional scheme, a false appearance sketched by limiting sense, mind's insufficient self-discovery, an early attempt, the first experiment. This was a toy to amuse the infant earth, but knowledge ends not in these surface powers that live upon a ledge in the ignorance and dare not look into the dangerous depths or to stare upward, measuring the unknown.
Thank you. So this, everything that has been described in the previous section, Sri Aurobindo says it's like that, but it's only a provisional scheme. It's only temporary. It's not the real final thing. It's a false appearance sketched by limiting sense. Our senses are so limited, and they limit us. What we perceive through our senses is very limited. So this scheme, which has been disguised and described, corresponds to mind's insufficient self-discovery. If we look with the mind and senses, we can see correspondences to what he's described, but this is just an early attempt, a first experiment. It's like a toy, an educational toy that we give to a baby, to amuse the infant earth and help it to become more consciousness. But this is not the end of all knowledge. Knowledge ends not in these surface powers. They are just on the surface. They live, he says, upon a ledge in the ignorance. If you live on a ledge, you're always in danger of falling off. There are people who live in canyons and caves, or there have been in the past, and you just set up a little place where you can survive, but it's easy to fall off into the abyss. A little narrow ledge. And if you live on a ledge, you don't want to look down into the dangerous depths that you might fall into. And you're also reluctant to look up and see all that vastness far above. Martin.
There is a deeper seeing from within. And when we have left this small purlieus of mind, the greater vision meets us on the heights, in the luminous whiteness of the Spirit's gaze.
You can continue, please, Martin.
At last there wakes in us a witness soul that looks at truths unseen and scans the unknown. Then all assumes a new and marvelous face. The world quivers with a godlight at its core. In time's deep heart, high purposes move and build. Life's borders crumble and join infinity.
Yes. So this deeper seeing from within, this is what we have to gain, not to be limited to these surface powers, these small purlieus of mind. Purlieus are premises. If we talk about you pass under the Gopuram and you enter the purlieus of the temple, the precincts. So when we've left these small, limited purlieus of mind, a greater vision meets us on the heights, in the luminous whiteness of the Spirit's gaze. When we're seeing not with the mind, and especially not the surface mind, but we are seeing with the Spirit's gaze. Then, at last, wakes up in us a witness soul that looks at truths we can't see and scans the unknown. Then all assumes, the whole face of things looks completely different, new and marvelous. And we see that the whole world is quivering with life, with a God light at its very core, the very center and heart. We realize that in the deep heart of time, there are purposes that we are not aware of. High purposes move and live. And when we get that perception, then the borders, these limits of life, they just crumble and break down. They open up and join infinity. We were reading yesterday in the essays on the Gita. That's what the Gita asks us to do. It's what we all need to do. Ganga Lakshmi, would you read?
This broad, confused, yet rigid scheme becomes a magnificent imbroglio of the gods. Again, the work ambiguously divine. Our seekings are short-lived experiments made by your wordless and inscrutable power, testing its issue from unconscious light to meet its luminous self of truth and bliss.
Yes. So then this, what seems to be very fixed and rigid, this material universe, this broad, confused, and yet rigid scheme, suddenly we see that it's a magnificent imbroglio of the gods. An imbroglio is a very complicated plot of a drama. And it's very cleverly and beautifully and complex done. It's a game, a work ambiguously divine. It's deliberately difficult to understand. And our seekings to understand the world that we live in, it's not really us who are doing it. It's a wordless and inscrutable power, a power of consciousness, a power of spirit, testing its issues from inconscient night, finding out how to escape from the unconsciousness of matter. An issue is a way out, trying to find a way out from the darkness of inconscient matter to meet its luminous self of truth and bliss, the light at the core. Ravi?
It peers at the real through the apparent form. It labors in our mortal mind and sense, amid the figures of the ignorance, in the symbol pictures drawn by word and thought. It seeks the truth to which all figures point. It looks for the source of light with vision's lamp. It works to find the dweller of all worlds, the unfelt self within, who is the guide, the unknown self above, who is the goal.
That's this wordless and inscrutable power that's difficult for us to understand. That's what is trying how it can find its luminous self of truth and bliss. And it's looking, what it's looking very hard for with effort. When you peer, you have to screw up your eyes to see, It peers at the real. It wants to know and experience what is reality. But it has to look through all these apparent forms here in the material universe. And that same power is working hard, laboring in our mind, our mortal mind, which is subject to death, our mortal senses. In the midst of all these figures of the ignorance, these symbol pictures that we build up for ourselves through the mind by word and thought. That power is seeking for the truth that all figures are pointing to. It's looking for the source of light. For that it has to use the lamp of vision, looking at the world around it. But what it really wants is the source of light. Where is light of knowledge coming from? It works. It has to work. It has to engage in activity. But its real aim is to find out who really does the work. That unfelt self within, who is our guide. That unknown self above, who is the goal of all our seekings. Poonam.
All is not here a blinded nature's task. A word, a wisdom watches us from on high. A witness sanctioning her will and words. An eye unseen in the unseen vast. There is an influence from a light above. There are thoughts remote and seeing eternities. A mystic motive drives the stars and suns. In this passage from a deaf, unknowing force to struggling consciousness and transient breath, a mighty supernature waits on time.
Yes. So we may often feel that everything that happens here in the material world is the work of a blind, unconscious nature that we can't do anything about. But he says it's not like that. Everything here is not the work of a blinded nature. There's something else at work. We, in our little human worlds and ways, we are being watched. A word, a creative power, and a wisdom is watching us from the heights of the Spirit. And that's a witness, witnessing everything that nature does. And sanctioning, saying yes to it. A word, a wisdom watches us from on high. A witness sanctioning the will and the works of nature. We can consider it to be an eye always watching. We don't see it. And that eye is as if watching from the unseeing vasts, the blind material universe. There is an influence from a light above. There's consciousness. There are thoughts that are remote, very, very far away from us. And eternities, whole eternities, that are sealed, closed off to us. The stars and the suns of our material universe are being driven by a mystic motive, with a reason, a purpose that we don't understand. In our present evolutionary state, we're in a passage. We're halfway through this passage. We're moving from an unknowing force, the force that's at work in matter, which is deaf, which doesn't hear. But we are moving on through this passage to the state that we are in now, to struggling consciousness and transient breath. Breath keeps us alive, no? But we don't live very long as individuals. But all through this evolving process, something is waiting to happen. A mighty supernature waits on time, waits for its time to reveal itself. It's not all a blinded nature's task. There's another influence from above, and there's this mighty supernature which is waiting for its moment to reveal itself. Would you like to read?
The world is other than we know things and see. Our lives are a deeper mystery than we are dreaming. Our minds are starters is the race to God, our souls, the pure selves of the Supreme, across the cosmic fields through narrow lights, asking a scanty goal from fortune's ends. And yet, in the girl's wrap, there was the goal.
Thank you. So here we look at the world around us, and he tells us that the world is different. It's not what we think it is when we look at it, we think about it and see it. It's not really like that. Our lives are a much deeper mystery than we have dreamed of. They have a much deeper significance. Our minds are starters in the race to God. It's like a horse race, no? There are so many starters. Who will make it to the end? But our minds have a race to run. They have a goal to reach. And our souls are deputed selves of the Supreme. The Supreme Lord incarnates himself in each of us, in the soul. So we are like deputies here in our individuality. We are to act and grow for him. And he expresses that in a very beautiful and memorable image. He says, across the cosmic field, across the universe, the field of the universe, through narrow lanes, many narrow lanes, the one is walking like a beggar. He's just asking just a little gift from fortune's hands, what perhaps life will give him by chance. He's wearing the robes of a beggar. But who is this beggar? This is the Lord himself. All these appearances that we see, it's the Lord in disguise. Dana.
Even in the theater of these small lives, behind their act, a secret sweetness breathes, an urge of miniature divinity, a mystic passion from the wells of God, flows through the broader spaces of the soul, a force that helps, supports the suffering earth, an unseen nearness and a hidden joy.
Even in the theater of these small lives, where we play our parts in the drama of life, behind the act, where we can't see it, a secret sweetness breathes, an urge of miniature divinity. It's not yet the full glory, but it's beautiful all the same. A mystic passion from the wells of God, those deep places, is flowing through the guarded spaces of the soul, the protected parts. And this suffering earth is being supported by a force that helps it. And that force is near to us, although we don't see it, and it's full of hidden joy. Alexander, would you like to read?
There are muffled calls of laughter's undertones, the murmur of an occult happiness, an exaltation in the the depths of sleep, a heart of bliss within a world of pain. An infant nursed on nature's covered breast, an infant playing in the magic woods, fluting to rapture by the spirit's dreams, awaits the hour when we shall turn to his call.
So hidden behind the scenes, there's this unseen nearness and hidden joy, and somebody is even laughing at us. There are muffled throbs of laughter's undertones and the murmur of an occult happiness, a hidden happiness. In the depths of this sleep of unconsciousness, there's an exaltation, an intense enjoyment, a heart of bliss within a world of pain. And if that exaltation and that bliss were not there, this whole world couldn't exist at all. And he images that presence as an infant with a capital I. And what he says about this infant, about this child, makes us think of Lord Krishna. An infant, nursed on nature's covered breast. Secretly, nature is nourishing this infant. And he grows up a bit and he plays in the magic woods. He plays games, but he also plays a musical instrument. He plays his flute. And if we hear the sound of his flute, we can't resist it at all. He's fluting to rapture by the spirit's streams. And he's just waiting until we turn to his call. We hear him and we call and we run after him. Bhuvana.
In gratitude of freshly life, a soul that is as part of God's world, and sometimes it breaks through the solid skin and kindles a fire that makes us half one. In our body self, there sits a hidden power that sees the unseen and plans eternity. Our smallest parts have room for deepest ends.
Needs, deepest needs.
Deepest needs. There too, the golden messengers can come. A gold is cut in the mud wall of self. Across the golden treasure with gold heads, angels of ecstasy and self-giving power, and lodged in an inner sanctuary of beauty, the makers of the image of 𝒂𝒑𝒑𝒂𝒃.
Thank you. So he says this fleshly life, this physical life, life in the body, is like a clothing, an investiture we've put on. An investiture might even be a kind of uniform. Within it, there's a soul surviving. It's not just this physical life. There's a soul which is a spark of God. And sometimes that spark breaks through the sordid screen of the physical life. When it does that, it lights a fire, to kindle a fire. It's to get a fire burning. And when that fire starts burning, it makes us at least half divine. Even in the cells of the body, there's that hidden power is present. And that power sees what is unseen to us, all the invisible world, and it plans eternity, what is going to happen forever and ever and ever. Even our smallest parts, even the cells or the parts of the cells, they have room for deepest needs. Even there, into the cells, the golden messengers can come, the messengers of the truth. He speaks about the mud wall of self, this physical body. It's as if made out of mud, and it's a wall, and we live inside this mud wall. But they can open a door, and then those golden messengers, they are ready to bow their heads and stoop in order to enter in across the lowly threshold. The threshold is the sill between the outside and the inside. They enter, angels of ecstasy and self-giving. They enter. And lodged in the cells, in the body, in an inner sanctuary of dreams, there are beings living, the makers of the image of deity. They are the powers and qualities in our being which help to make us divine. So he lists some of them. You like to read? Shrine. Hermetic. Thank you. So who are these makers of the image of deity? The first one he mentions is pity. Sympathy is a very important element in our psychology which helps to make us more divine. And sacrifice, fire-winged sacrifice, the readiness to make sacrifices, to live as a sacrifice. And even just small flashes of sympathy and tenderness, they cast heaven lights from this secluded shrine of the heart where the soul lives. They cast their light. And in that heart's secluded shrine, a work is done in those deep silences. It's a wonderful work, a glory and wonder of spiritual sense, of spiritual significance. There's a laughter in beauty's everlasting space, which transforms world experience into joy. All these things are dwelling, inhabiting in the mystery of the untouched gulfs within us, the deep places we are not aware of. Lulled by time's beats, eternity sleeps in us. Lulling is what we do with a baby. We rock the baby in our arms that it will be peaceful and sleep. No? So by the beats of time, it's like a lullaby. No? Eternity sleeps in us. And in this sealed, hermetic heart, something that's hermetically sealed and nothing can penetrate it. It's totally waterproof and airproof and everything. In the sealed, hermetic heart, the happy core, the very center of the being, unmoved behind this outer shape of death, this physical body which will die, the eternal entity, our true, original, eternal, unique being, is preparing within us its matter of divine felicity, of divine happiness, its reign of heavenly phenomenon. It's going to manifest all kinds of wonderful events and happenings. Kamala. Isn't that wonderful? Even in our skeptic mind of ignorance, our doubting mind, there are some glimpses of the future. A foresight comes of some immense release, of some immense liberation. And our will lifts towards that possibility, slow and shaping hands. Just the fact that we long for it and wish for it helps it to manifest. Each part in us desires its absolute. It doesn't want to be partial and relative and small. It wants to be all that it can be. So our thoughts long for the everlasting light of knowledge. Our strength, whatever little strength we have, derives from it, comes to us from an omnipotent, all-powerful force. And he says, the worlds were made by a veiled God joy, a divine light. And eternal beauty wants to take forms that can be enjoyed. Since it's like that, since from a veiled God joy the worlds were made, and since eternal beauty asks for form, even here in our world, where everything is made of being's dust, our hearts are captured by ensnaring shapes. If we see something beautiful, we can't help responding to it, you know. And our very senses, our sense of touch and sight and hearing and smell and taste, they are blindly seeking for bliss. That's what they really want. So we'll stop there for today.
Yet was this only a provisional scheme, a false appearance sketched by limiting sense, mind's insufficient self-discovery, an early attempt, a first experiment. This was a toy to amuse the infant earth. But knowledge ends not in these surface powers that live upon a ledge in the ignorance, and dare not look into the dangerous depths, or to stare upward, measuring the unknown. There is a deeper seeing from within, and when we have left these small purlieus of mind, a greater vision meets us on the heights, in the luminous wideness of the Spirit's gaze. At last there wakes in us a witness soul that looks at truths unseen and scans the unknown. Then all assumes a new and marvelous face. The world quivers with a God light at its core. In time's deep heart, high purposes move and live. Life's borders crumble and join infinity. This broad, confused, yet rigid scheme becomes a magnificent imbroglio of the gods, a game, a work ambiguously divine. Our seekings are short-lived experiments made by a wordless and inscrutable power, testing its issues from inconscient night to meet its luminous self of truth and bliss. It peers at the real through the apparent form. It labours in our mortal mind and sense, amid the figures of the ignorance, in the symbol pictures drawn by word and thought. It seeks the truth to which all figures point. It looks for the source of light with vision's lamp. It works to find the doer of all works. The unfelt self within, who is the guide. The unknown self above, who is the goal. All is not here a blinded nature's task. A word, a wisdom watches us from on high. A witness sanctioning her will and works. An eye unseen in the unseeing vast. There is an influence from a light above. There are thoughts remote and sealed eternities. A mystic motive drives the stars and suns. In this passage from a deaf, unknowing force to struggling consciousness and transient breath, a mighty supernature waits on time. The world is other than we now think and see. Our lives a deeper mystery than we have dreamed. Our minds are starters in the race to God. Our souls deputed selves of the Supreme. Across the cosmic field, through narrow lanes, asking a scanty dole from fortune's hands, and garbed in beggars' robes, there walks the One. Even in the theatre of these small lives, behind the act, a secret sweetness breathes, an urge of miniature divinity, a mystic passion from the wells of God flows through the guarded spaces of the soul. A force that helps, supports the suffering earth. An unseen nearness and a hidden joy. There are muffled throbs of laughter's undertones, the murmur of an occult happiness, an exaltation in the depths of sleep, a heart of bliss within a world of pain. An infant nursed on nature's covered breast, an infant playing in the magic woods, fluting to rapture by the spirit streams, awaits the hour when we shall turn to his call. In this investiture of fleshly life, a soul that is a spark of God survives, and sometimes it breaks through the sordid screen and kindles a fire that makes us half divine. In our body's cells there sits a hidden power that sees the unseen and plans eternity. Our smallest parts have room for deepest needs. There too the golden messengers can come. A door is cut in the mud wall of self. Across the lowly threshold with bowed heads, angels of ecstasy and self-giving pass. And lodged in an inner sanctuary of dream, the makers of the image of deity live. Pity is there, and fire-winged sacrifice, and flashes of sympathy and tenderness cast heaven lights from the heart's secluded shrine. A work is done in the deep silences, a glory and wonder of spiritual sense, a laughter in beauty's everlasting space, transforming world experience into joy, inhabit the mystery of the untouched gulfs. Lulled by time's beats, eternity sleeps in us. In the sealed hermetic heart, the happy core, unmoved behind this outer shape of death, the eternal entity prepares within its matter of divine felicity, its reign of heavenly phenomenon. Even in our skeptic mind of ignorance, a foresight comes of some immense release. Our will lifts towards it slow and shaping hands. Each part in us desires its absolute. Our thoughts covet the everlasting light. Our strength derives from an omnipotent force. And since from a veiled God joy the worlds were made, and since eternal beauty asks for form, even here, where all is made of being's dust, our hearts are captured by ensnaring shapes. Our very senses blindly seek for bliss.